Okay, so for our third case study in the crime unit, we're on to Robert Merton, who is also a functionalist. So previously, I don't know if you're watching this in order, but basically the previous one that I did was Albert Cohen, who is also a functionalist and talks about status frustration. Now, Merton isn't a million miles away from Cohen in terms of what his theory is all about. Now, one of the criticisms of Albert Cohen was the fact that his theory assumed that working class boys in particular would have all a very similar, if not the same, reaction to a lack of status and material goods in society. He said that they would all join sort of a gang or a subculture and likely engage in criminal activity to gain status and material wealth through that. Now, whilst that might be true for some, okay, one of the big criticisms is that actually that's not the truth. That's not true for all of them, and also was only relevant for working class boys. Okay, so it's quite a narrow theory. Whilst it's good, there are some problems with it. Now, Merton's theory is very similar in some ways, but actually provides an answer to some of the questions that Cohen's theory raises. So, similarly, obviously, he's a functionalist. He talks about the goals set down in society, the mainstream goals. So, like we talked about with Cohen, how everyone wants the big house, the nice TV, and things like that, like the American dream. You might have studied in English, okay, but that's basically what we're talking about here. And basically, there's a mismatch between the goals in society and the ability to actually achieve those goals, otherwise known as the means. Okay, if you have the means to achieve something, you can achieve them. But if you don't have the means, there's no way that you can achieve the goals. Okay, so basically, Merton's theory is centered around this idea that actually there are some people who can achieve the goals through legitimate means, i.e., getting a job or something that's legal. But for those people who haven't got those means, they're going to have to achieve those goals or change the goals themselves. So basically, Merton talked about this in a very broad spectrum and talked about there are five possible ways that individuals could respond to those success goals and either being able to achieve them or not being able to achieve them. So the first one is quite simple: conformity. Okay, now hopefully most of you already know what that means, but simply you go along with it. Okay, you accept the goals, you want the big house, the nice TV, and you also accept the means. You accept that you have to be law abiding and you have to get a job and do it sort of the normal way, okay, in a sort of legal and legitimate way. You might gain educational qualifications in order to secure those jobs. So it's basically working hard, going along with the system, and achieving the goals that way. Potentially a bit slower, but it's on the right side of the law. Now, the second one is a bit more in line with what Cohen said. Okay, the second one's innovation. So they want the goals. Okay, they want the big house, they want the normal stuff, they want that American dream, but they found that actually they don't necessarily accept the legitimate, the legal way of attaining those goals. So they actually turn to crime instead. Now, usually this response is saved for the working class, typically males, like Cohen said. They might find that they actually are denied like educational qualifications and the top jobs that can allow them to earn lots of money. So they turn to crime instead. So this is very similar to that idea of status frustration. Okay, but this is innovation. They accept the goals, but they reject the means. Whereas with conformity, they accept both the goals and the means. Then third, we've got ritualism. Now, basically, this is a weird response, but it does happen. So, ritualism is a response where typically middle class individuals will accept the fact that they have to be law abiding. They'll get a job, maybe not a very challenging job as such, but they'll get a job and earn money. But they actually reject the goals. They don't want a big house. They don't want to sort of go overboard with their materialistic sort of impulses. They stay in low paid, low status, but still respectable jobs. And sort of just go along. They go through repetition and repetition. They just sort of go about their lives without being ambitious, but without breaking the law necessarily. Okay, now this is still a deviant response because the expectation in society is that you will sort of strive for more always. Now, these people don't do that. They don't really care about sort of advancing their position in society. They don't care about earning a bigger house and a nicer car and things like that. What they care about is just existing and carrying on. Okay, they're not going to innovate. They're not going to turn to crime, but they're going to just go along with it. Now, we've also got retreatism. So now this one is, well, it's hopefully fairly obvious. If you retreat from something, you pull back from it. So in this case, they pull back from both the means, so they don't get a legitimate job or anything like that, but they also don't want the goals. So they don't really want the big house. They don't want anything. Okay, now these sorts of people are usually considered sort of social outcasts. Okay, so they use this word here, vagrants. Now, for those of you who don't know, vagrancy is homelessness. Okay, so what we're talking about here is homeless people, and also people like drug addicts. Okay, people who don't care about getting a job, they don't care about being part of society, they don't care about sort of achieving much with their life. They are rejecting both the sort of the job and the goals associated with it. Okay, so they drop out of society. They sort of stay on the margins of society. So that's our fourth response. And then finally, we have rebellion. Now, these guys are, well, technically, I suppose you could probably call them anarchists, or sort of you could almost align them with sort of Marxists and sort of people who want to sort of change the whole system. So rebellion is basically the same as retreatism in some ways. They reject the goals, they reject the means, but instead of actually just sort of living with that, they decide that they want to change the goals and change the means. They would rather create a new society where things work for them. Okay, so this is quite a chaotic sort of response to sort of situation in society, but it's what some people go for. So they're not like retreatists in that they just sort of completely become outcasts. They want to change things. Okay, so these are the sorts of people who will go on protests and try and change the current system to fit their needs. Okay, so yeah, you could align it with like anarchism or sort of someone who's looking to sort of change the capitalist system to a socialist or communist system. They are rebelling from the current system of law and order and society. Okay, so that's Merton's theory. Okay, so just to remind you, okay, Cohen talked about status frustration in young working class boys, and the idea that they will turn to crime to achieve goals and to achieve status in society. Merton expands on that slightly and actually gives 5 different responses that people can have to the goals set down by society and the means in which to achieve them. Okay, you've got conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. Now, one thing to take into account with Merton, there are a few criticisms here. Now, the key one for me, at least, have a read of them by all means. But the key one is that his responses that he describes are generally focused around utilitarian crime, and what I mean by that is financial crime, stuff that gains you money. So his responses don't really give an explanation for crimes like vandalism, for example, where there's no clear gain by doing those crimes, in terms of certainly not in terms of finance. People still commit those crimes, and he doesn't really have an explanation for that. Okay, but for things like theft, burglary, and that sort of thing, this is a perfect theory because it actually can give several reasons why someone might commit that sort of crime to gain the goals in society. But yeah, as I said, the non-utilitarian crimes, the ones that have no clear financial motive, it doesn't really explain that too well. Okay, so that's Merton. Again, as always, if you have any questions about this theory, then by all means drop us an email. Now, I will say this is a great theory. Okay, I really enjoy this theory because it does cover a lot of basis. So do try and use it in your essays if you can. And just bear in mind, if you were to get a 4 or a 3 marker on Merton, the more than likely thing that would happen is they would ask you to describe one or more responses to society. So one or more responses to the goals set down by society and the means to achieve them. In which case you'd need to know at the very least, one of these very, very well. Now, personally, I would go for innovation. I think that's the easiest, but you can go for any of the five. It doesn't really matter which one you go for. Okay, so that's Merton, and I'll see you in the next video.